Welcome to another lesson. Hi everyone! Today we will be discussing two topics, and these are the general guidelines in choosing the appropriate test format and the major categories and formats of traditional tests. Let's have first the general guidelines in choosing the appropriate test format. Not every test is universally valid for every type of learning outcomes. To guide you in choosing the appropriate test format in designing fair yet challenging tests, you should ask these important questions. Number 1. What are the objectives or desired learning outcomes of the lesson being assessed? Deciding on what test format to use generally depends on your learning desired outcomes of the lesson. These are statements of what learners are expected to do as a result of engaging in the learning process. Number 2. What level of thinking is to be assessed? The level of thinking to be assessed is also an important factor to consider when designing your test, as this will guide you in choosing the appropriate test format. It is important that when constructing classroom assessment tools, all levels of cognitive behaviors are represented. These include the remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating.
The third following important questions: is a test matcher aligned with the course's desired learning outcomes and the course contents of learning activities? The assessment test should be aligned with the instructional activities and the DLOs, or what we call desired learning outcomes. Thus, it is important that you are clear about what DLOs are to be addressed by your test and what course activities or tasks are to be implemented to achieve the DLOs. For example, if you want learners to articulate and justify their stand on ethical decision-making and social responsibility practices in business, then an essay test and class debate are appropriate measures and tasks for this learning outcome. A multiple-choice test may be used, but only if you intend to assess learners' ability to recognize what is ethical versus unethical decision-making practice. In the same manner, matching type items may be appropriate if you want to know whether your students can differentiate and match the different approaches or terms to their definitions. The fourth following important questions: are the test items realistic to the students? Test items should be meaningful and realistic to the learners. They should be relevant or related to their everyday experiences. The use of concepts, terms, or situations that have not been discussed in the class or that they have never encountered, read, or heard about should be minimized or avoided. This is to prevent learners from making wild guesses, which will undermine your measurement of what they have really learned from the class.
What are the major categories and formats of traditional tests? For the purposes of classroom assessment, traditional tests fall into two general categories. 1. Selected response type, in which learners select the correct response from the given options. 2. Constructed response type, in which the learners are asked to formulate their own answers. The cognitive capabilities required to answer selected response items are different from those required by constructed response items, regardless of content. Selected response tests require learners to choose the correct answer or best alternative from several choices. While they can cover a wide range of learning materials very efficiently and measure a variety of learning outcomes, they are limited when assessing learning outcomes that involve more complex and higher level thinking skills. Selected response tests include multiple choice test, It is the most commonly used format in formal testing and typically consists of a STEM or problem, one correct or best alternative or the correct answer, and three or more incorrect or inferior alternatives or the distractors. True-false or alternative response test. It generally consists of a statement and deciding if the statement is true, accurate or correct, or false, inaccurate, or incorrect. Matching type test. It consists of two sets of items to be matched with each other based on a specified attribute.
Constructed response tests require learners to supply answers to a given question or problem. It is a type of assessment which is use paper and pencil. Through the use of short answer responses and essay items on a test, a student is able to show their knowledge and ability to exemplify their understanding of a set of academic skills. Short answer test. It consists of open-ended questions or incomplete sentences that require learners to create an answer for each item, which is typically a single word or a short phrase. It is a call for students to supply a word, a phrase, or a sentence in response to either a direct question or incomplete statement. A short answer responses assess a student obtain of certain knowledge and require students to produce a correct answer. This includes the following types. The first one is completion. Completion. It consists of incomplete statements that require the learners fill in the blank with the correct word or phrase. For example, blank is the powerhouse of the cell, so the answer is mitochondria. During the completion test, students are required to fill in the gap in a lead sentence with a phrase, word, or numbers that best suits the context. The second one is identification. It consists of statements that require the learners to identify or recall the terms or concepts, people, places, or events that are being described. It is also a type of examination which can be scored objectively. Like it can be a recall type of examination, usually demands only a short answers, most often used to assess key facts and terms. It is also a form of restricted response test. For example, it requires learners to choose the correct answers or a best alternative from several choices. And the answer is selected response test. And the last one is enumeration. It requires the learners to list down all possible answers to the question. It is a type of test or exam is done by enumerating particular answers to particular questions. For example, give the 4 knowledge dimensions in the revised Bloom's taxonomy of educational objective. And the 4 knowledge dimensions are factual, conceptual, procedural, and metacognitive. The second type of test is an essay test. It consists of problems or questions that require learners to compose or construct written responses, usually long ones with several paragraphs. For example, the questions are: how do you see yourself 10 years from now? How do you value your life? Explain this. Don't let anyone rush your timeline. Therefore, essay test requires you to see the significance and meaningful of what you know. It tests your knowledge and understanding of the subject on your skill in reading and writing.
Essay test. It consists of problems or questions that require learners to compose or construct written responses, usually long ones with several paragraphs. This is the example for essay test. Future plans and goals. Colleges look for applicants with vision and motivation, so they might ask about
your goals and aspirations. These are the guide questions. Briefly describe your long and short-term goals. Where do you see yourself 10 years from now? Why do you want to get college education? Problem-solving test. It consists of problems or questions that require learners to solve problems in quantitative or non-quantitative settings using knowledge and skills in mathematical concepts and procedures and/or other higher order cognitive skills. For example, reasoning, analysis, critical thinking, and skills. This is the example for problem-solving test. Multiple choice test. Multiple choice test questions, also known as items, can be an effective and efficient way to assess learning outcomes. Multiple choice test items have several potential advantages. First is versatility. Multiple choice test items can be written to assess various levels of learning outcomes, from basic recall to application, analysis, and evaluation. Because students are choosing from a set of potential answers, however, there are limits on what can be tested with multiple choice items. For example, they are not an effective way to test students' ability to organize thoughts or articulate explanations or creative ideas. Second is reliability. Reliability is defined as a degree to which a test consistently measures a learning outcome. Multiple choice test items are less susceptible to guessing the true or false questions, making them more reliable means of assessment. The reliability is enhanced when the number of MC items focused in a single learning objective is increased. In addition, the objective scoring associated with multiple choice test items frees them from problems with scorer inconsistency that can plug scoring of essay questions. Last one is validity. Validity is the degree to which a test measures the learning outcomes it purports to measure. Because students can typically answer a multiple choice item much more quickly than an essay question, tests based on multiple choice items can typically focus on a relatively broad representation of course material, thus increasing the validity of the assessment.